That Sigma new place there.
Jobs.
There's a Kappa Alpha and Sigma Nu. These are two bad.
It's not gonna, I mean, you can lean against it. You guys have a wall, beautiful.
Mr.
wall.
Mayor, this agenda
Your
looks
name's
like
John
it
Waller,
could be a speedy.
job by Tom
I'll say
Gill,
that.
John Henke.
Is that fixing it?
Yes.
That's a SBU's course.
There's certainly that opportunity.
Yeah, cut through all the-
The old don't count your
How's it
chickens before
going,
they
Leslie?
hatch.
You doing good
I
today?
remember that one of the speediest
not-
ones.
she don't wanna answer.
Under half
Focus.
hour.
Mhm.
What's that?
I was saying hello.
Oh, hello.
Like the new greens.
Hallelujah night.
The greens. That's SBU, right? There's House Mountain. Keep it with the greens for what? At the golf course. Oh. It does that. It's at the Vista Links. They're putting a new
What they put in?
new green at the Vista Links.
Just segment it in the morning.
SVU's doing that?
Yes, I understand you're blessing the meal.
Yeah.
Night,
It's
yeah.
Give the benediction. So.
Really?
Yeah, Facebook thing?
Yeah.
Blockheads.
You can use Facebook on
I read my prayers to the tail. It's like, go get that.
City computer.
Can I get an amen?
They were only gonna keep 9.
Me this evening.
Is that good?
Looks like they're doing synthetic.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the February 16th edition of the Lexington City Council. Before I call the meeting to order, invite anyone who would like to speak tonight to sign in on the sign up sheet. And glad that you all are here. And Jeremy, glad you're with us virtually. Good commute to the desk. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item of business, if you all will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Next item is consideration of the agenda. Members of council have any items they'd like to tweak, change, eliminate, or otherwise? And if there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as presented. It is adopted. Thank you. Next item is public hearings. And we're continuing the public hearing for consideration to review the request from Echelon Resources. And before I call on the public to speak, I want to invite our committee members to offer any comments. Ms. Strawn?
Sure. I'd just like to explain our process a little bit. So we had that design team and it was Arnie Glazer and Marilyn Alexander and myself for the city and Brandy Cosby and Edwin Gaskin from Echelon. And then the architect, Dave Kelly from Pool and Pool Architecture out of the Richmond area. And so we've met several times throughout the month and talked about what type of materials we'd like to see and elements that we thought would be fitting for the building. And actually, one of our first discussions we talked about right off the bat was the roof. Looking at, we would try to see if we could have a pitched roof rather than a flat roof. And looking at the way our guidelines are in the city code, the definition of the building height is from the threshold of the door to the highest point on the building. And so, which is normally your rooftop. And it's been pointed out to us by other architects that some localities use from the door stoop to the eave, so that it does not include the roof height. But being what it is, those are what our guidelines are. And so Echelon wanted to work within that. And so it dictated that they were going to have a flat roof on the building, which contributed in part to having a more contemporary design. And then we got into what colors we'd like to see. And like Marilyn explained at a previous meeting, we told them that we'd like to see something that using materials and colors that were compatible with both the neighborhood, the cemetery, the buildings next to it, including, the Piovano building in the hospital. And that just reflected Lexington in general. And we looked at a number of pictures and told them what we liked and did not like about different style of apartment buildings. So it was very interesting the following meeting when we came back and they had a rendering that was very similar to what you see in the packet. And I think all of us were pleasantly surprised and really liked how they took our comments and put it into practice in the building. So I was just going to highlight a few things about the building design. So on the first picture that you have in the packet, and I don't know, Jamie, can you show it on the screen, or if not, don't worry about that. Sorry, I should have given you a heads up on that. So we had told them that we'd like to see some brick in Lexington. That's a common building material. People tend to like seeing brick on buildings. However, we did not want too much brick, so did not have an institutional feel to it. And as you can tell, they incorporated more brick in the design. We talked about colors, and one of the colors we had mentioned was gray. And gray it's a very on-trend color right now. It's also a timeless color. It's a color that's used a lot to bridge historic buildings with contemporary additions. And it's also reflective of our native stone. And so they've used some gray lap siding that you can see in the picture. In the lap siding, as with all the siding, is a cement board, a very durable material. They also use some gray with the split concrete block as accents. And again, that's reflective of materials you see both in the houses, in the cemetery, the stone wall around the cemetery, and out in our natural environment. So we were pleased to see that. That's a very durable, low maintenance building material. And then we had also told them we wanted to keep it light and airy. We didn't want to get it too dark. So they put lots of white in it as well. So you see lots of white siding, and they also added wood look accent trims. So the wood is also lap siding, and it's the cement board as well. So it is a very sturdy material. And looking at the drawings, I'm going to start with the first drawing, which is from the Spotswood view. That is actually not the front of the building, but for passerbys, that's what you'll see first. And remember that the building is in an L shape. So it comes down the spots, and that's in a later picture, but the short end of the L is on Spotswood, and then it runs parallel to the Piovano building is the larger part of the building. So the front of the building will actually screen somewhat most of the apartment units, some of the massing. So on the first perspective, you can see to the right side, you see the white area, and that is actually running parallel to the Piovano building. And then the main part of that is right on Spotswood Drive. The other thing to notice about that is the elevation. That property has a pretty severe elevation change. And we had the elevation maps in our original CUP, and they'll be back at the next CUP. So you can ask Echelon in detail about some of the questions. But roughly, if you look at the elevation map from the parking lot of the medical center down to Spotswood Drive, that's about a 20-foot drop. And so the basement level of the apartment building will start about 5 feet up above the sidewalk. And then you'll have the basement level, which is mostly in the red brick on the front. There's 6 units there. And then it'll step up 10 feet to the ground level, which will still sit about 5 feet below the parking lot, if all that makes sense to you. And the whole building does not have a basement level. It's just that front level so that you are working within the slope of the natural terrain. And like I said, there'll be 6 units down on that basement level. And then as you turn the corner, and on that second picture, it shows the end of your L, and the gray section is one of the entrances. That's to the basement level, and that is mostly a stairwell level, but you can see the contours in the parking lot as you're going uphill. So that once you turn that corner and get to the third elevation, where is really the main entrance to the complex, is a 3-story level with most of your units. And some of the amenities, I like that all the units all have balconies. That's a nice feature for the owners. It also looks really good. And that was, if you recall, we recently changed our zoning ordinance to encourage some of those architectural features, including balconies. So I was glad to see that they included amenities such as that. And then really the only other thing I wanted to let you know is this does not, we will get an actual landscape and lighting plan during the site plan phase. So this is just a rendering at this point. It's not the actual plans for that. And I wanted to thank Echelon for working with us. I mean, I really was pleased with how they listened to our input and considered, they really wanted to work towards something that would appeal to all of Lexington. And I think they did a very good job, and we will meet with them tomorrow. So any feedback we get, we'll discuss with them tomorrow. That's all I had, unless Marilyn, you want to add?
I don't have much to add. I think you were very thorough. In the second rendering, there's a section that does not have balconies, and that is a community room area that they will have. And that was, and then that also in that section, initially when they brought it back to us, it was just a flat gray area, and they did add some elements to give it some extra texturing. And the other textures used, as Leslie said, was the wood and the stone and the brick, and that those elements were added to enhance the look. So, you know, we're pretty much pleased. And I think that, and as she also said, they were not really willing to change the contemporary look to something else, that this was something that, you know, was their vision. And so we just worked within those guidelines that it would need to be something a little bit more contemporary than maybe what some people would prefer. But I think that we have ended up with a pretty good example of what this could be. But we look forward to comments that the public would have, because we would like to take that information back to Echelon tomorrow to share with them.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Members of council have any additional questions? Mr. Betts.
So this isn't the final. I was wondering if the solid gray section in perspective 1 is that going to stay solid gray, or most likely?
Yeah, and it is broken up some. That whole unit is the stairwell, and when we first saw it, actually was all lap siding, and Maryland made that same point, and they added some of the split concrete stone at the bottom, extended, can't remember, extended or added the eave over the door, and then added some little different material between the windows to try to break it up some.
I think,
Change the windows a little bit too.
Right, yeah.
I think it could look good if the wood kind of either went at the top or through the middle, just, a slight suggestion, but I don't know if that's possible, but. Kind of like I like the look of the wood that's next to it, and might look good to
The
kind of
wood-
extend that
Extend the wood into the gray.
to the gray a little bit to break it up a little bit.
Okay. And that's in perspective number 2.
Perspective one.
One.
Which is actually the second drawing. I had them reorder them.
Leslie, I have one statement and I think one question. The statement being is going back to the circumstance in your discussions with Echelon. What the city's requested is an apartment building, and that's what they've continued and been strident about providing. And I'm glad you point out the discussion about the pitched roof versus flat roof and that architectural design. The question I have is relative to the balconies. Do you know the size of those? Is that something people would be able to put a chair or a table out on it, or is it strictly ornamental?
It's big enough to go out on, from what I recall, and we'll see it in the CUP. I think they were only 5 feet deep. They weren't really large, but I think it was 5 feet deep, big enough to put a chair on.
Very good. Thank
And
you.
I will comment too, I meant to mention when we did end up with the flat roof, I was a little disappointed, but I have to say, I thought they turned it into a great architectural feature, and I like how it turned out. It also, behind the wall where the roof actually is, there's about roughly a 6-foot drop, and they can tell you the exact amount, but that will screen some of the equipment will screen the equipment that's on the rooftop.
Everybody will want their HVAC,
Right.
without a doubt. Very good. Any other, Ms. Alexander?
When we talked about the pitched roof, we were talking about whether the pitched roof would be better in regard to maintenance than a flat one. And they said, on the contrary, that they have found that the flat roof would be much easier to maintain. And with most or all of their construction, they've been going with flat roofs.
And no roof is truly flat. It all has a pitch so that the water runs down.
Right. But architecturally pitched. Very good. Thank you. There are no other comments from council. We are continuing the public hearing, and we'll ask if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak to this item. Yes, ma'am, Miss Ann. Pretty please. Yes, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Only the truth and nothing but.
And I'm going to ask you to step in front of the microphone there. So
Ann Hopkins, 110 Colonial Lane. Basically, I'm against a building on that site. I think it belongs to the cemetery, and it was deeded many years ago, according to what I've read. So that said, I appreciate all of the time and effort and work that you've all put into reviewing this, and it's very thoughtful. And this is what I'm going to say is not a criticism of your efforts whatsoever. But it looks like a motel. Flat roof. If you go down, near Washington, D.C., you'll see a lot of motels that look like this. So it looks like a motel to me. I think we need to think about the traffic, do a traffic study. It doesn't matter to me that it doesn't meet some criteria here or there. When we want to get things done correctly with the people in mind, we can change that and have a waiver and do a traffic study. I have a couple questions. Where's the entrance to this motel?
And when we have the public hearings, it's to hear from the public, not to
Oh,
engage
okay.
in discussion, but would
No.
direct you to the city manager and Arnie. They can
Okay.
firm up all the details such as that.
It wasn't clear in the newspaper
Right.
picture that I saw. I'm not sure I understand why. Is it a done deal that we can't have a pitched roof? Yeah, okay. And I'm not quite clear on why that is, something about height of things and how it's measured. And my last comment is, if we need the tax money, maybe we can look at some other ways to raise taxes and not put a building and take up that remaining beautiful space. Thank you.
And thank you for coming and sharing those insights with us. And I'll ask staff to follow up with you on the details related to your questions on where the entrance is and the specific, because the newspaper only can carry so much or print so much from that capacity. And I'd also direct you to, I can't tell you exactly which meeting, but there's documentation and presentation that I provided on the chain of delivery of that property from, I believe, the McCoy estate to the city of Lexington, where it was purchased at market value and has been dedicated not for the cemetery, but for city development for at least the last 30 years. So there, I'm not sure the information that you researched, but under the Spotswood string of meetings and presentations that's out there, and I can probably pull it and get it to you a little bit easier, and we'll be glad to share that with you. But absolutely, it is a beautiful space and beautiful property. From my perspective as a kid growing up, it was all a big field. There was no Spotswood Drive. There was Houston, and if you wanted to get to Main Street, you had to go through, you had to trespass, which people weren't so persnickety about back in the 70s. So is there anyone else who would like to speak in this public hearing? Hearing none, we will continue the public hearing and anticipate that the applicant will be here at our March 2nd meeting to present the conditional use permit for continuing the public hearing, at which time we'll anticipate closing and having council consider that application. So mark your calendars for March 2nd for that event. Next item on the agenda is consideration of minutes. They were in your packet, and ask if there are any changes. Ms. Strawn?
I had one small correction on page 20 of 25 at the top. Under the discussion for the city manager's report, it says council members Sigler and Strawn, city manager Hallis, director Bell had a meeting with the county about the CAD system. If we could just add that Chief Dickerson was there as well. In the meeting, we didn't discuss the CAD system. It was about fire and rescue issues, but budget and the agreement.
Very good. Got that locked in, Janie? Anything else? Hearing none with that modification, I'd ask for council's, if there's no objection, we'll adopt the or approve the minutes with that modification. It stands approved. Next item is citizen remarks and comments. Invite anyone who would like to speak to any other items on the agenda or not, anything that may be on your mind. Is there anyone, I didn't see anyone had signed up, but is there anyone who would like to speak to council this evening? Hearing the roar of the HVAC, I will close the citizens' remarks and comments and go to the consent agenda and ask for council's consideration of the two requests.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion and a second, and I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler. Aye. Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, and mark your calendars for May 29th. The request from Rich Hastings for Memorial Day celebration and the Road and River Relay on May 6th. Good, fun events. Next item is unfinished business. I won't call on the city manager, but we're continuing to work on the amending the noise ordinance, and that will come to us at some point in time in the future, as well as the Horse Center request for the renewal of the 1% lodging tax. We will, those are place markers to keep in the forefront of our mind, and action on those will be indicated on future agendas. Next item of boards and commissions and Blue Ridge Resource Authority, Mr. Smith.
Blue Ridge Resource Authority met on Monday. We were presented with a draft budget from Director Dudley with a $1 increase in tipping fees at the base rate for member municipalities. Also received the resignation of Jordan Dory, who's been our admin assistant at the landfill, and that has been advertised for replacement. That's all I have. Any questions?
Anyone want to talk trash? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Main Street, Lexington, Mr. Smith.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Planning Commission, Ms. Strawn.
We met last Thursday and we continued our discussion on accessory dwelling units. And we will at a future meeting discuss the map that you brought up, Mr. Mayor, on for the and I'm clicking on the opportunity area, that it was not intended for it to have any part of Maple Lane on there. So we're going to review that and just make sure that see if we need to correct that map.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for Planning Commission? Regional Tourism, Mr. Betts.
Sure. We discussed some of the accomplishments from 2022. I'll share some highlights from that. There was direct visitor expenditures of 198.5 million in Lexington, Buena Vista, Rockbridge County in 2021. That's in terms of direct visitor expenditures. As part of the American Rescue Plan, regional spending plan, there was 2 media tours in June and October that generated journalist visits 17, articles published 40, national outlets 30, media research 2+ billion potential customers, and a media value of $915,000. The USA BMX Blue Ridge Nationals from 2022 athletes, there was 1,141 athletes from 39 states and 2 foreign countries. Daily attendance was 4,792. The 3-day attendance was 14,376, with estimated room nights of 3,194. The Freedom Food Festival funds raised 28,000. Nonprofits participating 14, meal tickets 1,800, alcohol wristbands 1,000, and attendees were 3,000 for the Freedom Food Festival. In regards to tourism event sponsorship, there was funding to promote regional events to visitors from at least 50 miles away. Tourism awards were 18,731, 67 cents. There were 14 events in Lexington, Buena Vista, and Rockbridge. The Shenandoah Beer Works Trail, passports redeemed, 7,448. To date, visitor origins, there's 48 states, including DC, also DC and 5 foreign countries. Recorded brewery visits were in Rockbridge were 759. Regarding Rockbridge Outdoors, Kids in Parks Track Trail, there was a grant for $27,500, and Thistle Ridge Disc Golf Trail grant $33,946. And in terms of market research, there were total visitors to Rockbridge of 639,024 people, and top cities of origination were DC, Richmond, Roanoke, Lynchburg, Norfolk, Newport News, Charlottesville, New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. Overnight visitors stayed about 2.6 7-9 days, and day trippers came for about 4.75 hours. So that's some of the statistics we discussed.
Lots of numbers. To be sure.
Just want to be thorough.
Lots of success in 2022.
Yeah.
Good work. Good work. Having had the opportunity to attend the BMX, it's remarkable the number of races, the number of participants, and the joy that the folks seem to have at that event in particular. So lots of treasures in our community that, as I like to say, a little hick town with nothing going on. There's a lot to do. So, any questions for Mr. Betts? I look forward to a successful and active 2023. Raro, Mr. Ziegler.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Threshold, Ms. Alexander.
No report.
And Maury Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
We didn't meet, MSA board didn't meet, but I do have an answer to Mr. Smith's question last month about the floodplain. And I'd mentioned before, and to your question about where was the floodplain, I told you there were two conflicting levels. As it happens, one of the levels included the MSA water plant itself, which was clearly high level, and the other one was much lower than that, about 20 feet difference. What was curious to me is that both reports flooded the water intake plant. So then one would then question, why was the water intake plant located where it was if it was subject to inundation from the 100-year plain? Well, it wasn't required to be built at that level at the time, but it's one of the big items in the modernization list to relocate. And the question was where, and that's where those floodplain numbers came in. And so the survey that was conducted showed that the lower of the two was close within 2 or 3 feet of the map, the actual floodplain mark. So that's going to be the number that's used, and that'll be the number that'll be submitted to FEMA, Federal Emergency. Apparently they're involved in getting approval, one of the approvals of many approvals that are needed for doing this water plan. So I hope that fills you in on what it was. That was a great question last week, and sorry I couldn't answer it last week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Alligood. Any other questions for MSA? I would remind council members, when you do make your presentations, if you're able to put that in written form and share it with Janie, it sure saves her a lot of time as she prepares the minutes to be A, accurate, and B, a lot less time involved in listening to tapes. So thank you all for your help and support of the clerk. Next item is the mayor's report. I have a couple of items. Number one, the code of ethics. I think if I remember correctly, the city manager shipped that out, a proposed draft. So if you have additional comments, please get those in. Otherwise, March or April, plan to bring that back to council for your consideration. You all received the notification from Molly Fox of her resignation from the school board. It's effective June 30 of 23, which actually when her term ends. So not necessarily resigning, but not looking to re-up. So initially I was thinking that we needed to fill her position, but we will have that vacancy for June 30. And anticipate we'll do our regular appointment process because the General Assembly is not address the election of school board members at this point. And first meeting in June, we will interview prospective candidates, and our second meeting appoint someone for to be seated July 1 for the school board reorganizational meeting. I spoke with Rebecca Logan earlier. The triangle at the bottom of Main Street City staff has done a great job of helping organize and prepare for that, but she said we're in a position of supply chain issues, and the forms for the beds have not been delivered. And there's I'm not exactly sure the problem with the supply chain and getting those here, but once those are delivered, those forms, everything will go lickety split, and we should be able to get flowers planted this spring still. Hope to be done this past fall, but it's still in process. As you may recall, it's been a couple of years, but Sigma Nu came and requested modification to be able to have a large center for training and housing folks, and their dedication is tomorrow at noon. And I think all city council was invited for that, and look forward to attending and seeing the final project completion and how Sigma Nu intends to utilize that. We do have a vacancy on a Threshold, and Ash Mullis, who we had appointed, I think last year, has taken a new job with the library that doesn't work with her schedule to be able to participate. So she has resigned her position there. And at the Mayors and Chairs breakfast yesterday morning, Buena Vista expressed some concern about the library in Buena Vista and the services. The city owns the building that they've been housed in, and the library relocated to a church because of concerns with the building, which was not authorized, which contractually Buena Vista would need to approve their relocation to another site. But there's, I would say, more to come. And Buena Vista talked about the potential of cutting the funding for the Buena Vista location or their contribution to the regional library, but still in early discussions of that. But just wanted to make you aware of that relocation and concerns that the council and staff have of the operations of the Buena Vista Library. And that is all I have for my report, and welcome any questions you may have.
I had
Yes, sir.
one on, as far as the transition from a appointed to elected school board. Do we initiate the changes to the charter, or does the General Assembly take that up on their own?
I'm going to defer to my attorney. I think that it's, we need to alert them of that change. And I know that we've communicated that when we were in Richmond to Ellen in particular, but I don't know that that bill has been submitted.
It would start with the General Assembly. You can certainly let them, make them aware of that. There is a provision in the code section, though, that states that the provision for going through the referendum to establish an elected school board applies notwithstanding any other provision of the charter. So I think everything would still move forward towards your, I think it would be 2024, according to Jackie, when the first school board elections would be. So I don't think the absence of a charter change yet should stand in the way of preparing for that.
Correct. Mr. Ziegler?
No, I was just gonna say that Jackie said that most likely, that we would appoint people if resignations occurred until the regular election occurred. There would not be a special election prior to 2024, November 2024. So
Correct.
When Dr. Fox was here and learned that her term could be extended by a year and a half, right. I think that's what it was essentially, that I think that her family and her work life, everything just kind of, she reassessed and said, I'm proud of the 6 years that I'll have served. And so she had to resign.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jeremy. Next item on the agenda, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A little information on our fire department. We all know that they respond to a lot of difficult calls. And recently they had to respond to an ATV accident near Colliersville with 3 children involved, and all 3 were hospitalized. One was flown to a trauma center and the other 2 are here in Carillion. So those type of accidents are really tough. for the department. I really admire them for handling those things as they have to do. On a brighter note, last Saturday night, they had their annual awards banquet. And while there were numerous awards presented to individuals and responder teams throughout the department, I would like to focus on a few that are perhaps more significant and share those with you. Lieutenant Larry Clemmer was named Officer of the Year. Firefighter EMT Justin Jarvis was named Fireman of the Year by vote of his fellow firefighters. EMT Ryan Carpino was named EMS Provider of the Year. Firefighter Medic Wes Harlow was named Outstanding Fireman by vote of the department officers. And EMT Chris Haskett was named the Rookie of the Year. And of course, all of them are to be congratulated for their work and how well they represented our department and our city. In addition, however, 8 cardiac arrest saves were awarded to a number of EMS providers and several unit citations were awarded. And even if we haven't mentioned, or I haven't mentioned all the names of the individuals on our fire department team, they all contribute to the great work that they provide to our city and to our extended community out in Rockbridge County. So we're very lucky to have those highly qualified and committed individuals to serve us. Little information on revenues. We always have a monthly revenue report, and we have our January revenues. Typically, I would ask Jen Bell, our finance director, to be here and present this, but since we had a short meeting, she wanted to stay in the office and work on the FY24 budget because it was more exciting than the meeting. So figure that out if you want. The January revenues continue as a whole to surpass our revenue projections. Meals and lodging revenues are performing well ahead of budget, as is rescue fees and interest earnings. Sales tax revenues are beginning to fall off, as they always do after Christmas. At this time, it appears we may miss this revenue by a slight margin at year end. Water and sewer revenues, however, are also seasonally declining, and if previous trends for other fiscal years continue, we'll miss the revenue mark on water and sewer this year. It seems already true that that's going to happen based on what we've seen in past years in the spring. Overall, in the 4 major general fund revenue categories we are tracking, those are the major revenue areas of sales, meals, lodging, and interest. We're about $630,000 ahead of budget at this time. So we're in pretty healthy shape at this point in time. And of course, the full revenue report is at your seat, so you could look at it later. And it's also available on our website, so the public can pull it up at any time and take a look at what we've seen to date in our FY23 budget. In past years, I understand that VMI would regularly invite City Council to the Post to see any changes and to better understand how the Post is operating. And VMI would like to re-engage with City Council in this manner. And they're looking at dates to ask Council to join General Wins and the VMI staff for this purpose. And in all likelihood, this will be the second half of March when they'll send an invitation out. So to join them, walk around the Post some sunny afternoon, hopefully, and see what's changed and how things are working out there at one of our substantial partners and neighbors here. Little research occurring in Brushy Hills, a little unusual. A local resident and VMI graduate is doing research on bats and the impacts on them from increased urbanization. As part of this research, the Friends of Brushy Hill approached me to see if a bat monitoring station could be placed in Brushy Hills Preserve. The researcher would then access the data for this study they are completing. This creates no permanent intrusion into the ecosystem of Brushy Hills or temporary problems of any sort, and the Friends support this work, and I approved it. Again, this is temporary, so it's a small structure, a pole of some sorts with some monitoring instruments on it. They're waiting to see what time of year the bats come out and how they communicate when they come out of their hibernation. Well beyond me, but it's important to the life of the bats, apparently. A few changes in our life and safety procedural inspections and reviews. Over the past several years, our inspection staff and our fire marshal have found that in cases where tents are erected and more seem to be used, there are some life safety issues that are not always properly addressed. And these primarily are involved with heating. The heating elements in the tents themselves are sometimes creating a danger to those occupants of the tent, either because of the flammable nature of the tent and where the heating structures are located, but also the fact that if they're in the middle of the tent itself, carbon monoxide can be a problem. The other issue that's somewhat significant is that many of the tents don't have well-designed egress points, and you can have, dozens, if not 100 or more people in some tents, and if they don't have good access, again, if something were to occur, people could be hurt. So these are safety issues, and what we are going to be doing is requiring permits and we'll inspect those tents. There's no fee for the permits. We don't want to penalize people. We just want to educate and make sure individuals in our community are always kept safe. In a similar fashion, we've found that from time to time, structures that have an intended or designed use are being used for a different use. So you may have some large gathering, say in the Grand Building downtown, the old Grand store, a concert, some type of indoor event. And of course, the bathrooms were never designed to handle 100 or 200 people. That's somewhat problematic. The egress points, again, were not designed for that many people exiting at once. So we want to be, again, sure that when somebody's using a building for purposes other than what it was designed for, especially with large numbers of people, that we have a chance to look that over, work with the individuals to put in place a plan and means of keeping the building safe for those temporary events. So again, no fees involved, not trying to be put any penalties in place, just trying to make sure we're safe. We've all seen instances around the country where people are in a space that is not safe. They're injured, sometimes killed as they try and egress from a particular event or activity. And, you know, we can avoid that here. Last item was on our agenda tonight as an old item of business, but next week, meeting with the county administrator, Spencer Suter, with Glenn Petty and Sandra Thomas from the Horse Center. And we'll be clarifying the use of the and need for the additional 1 cent lodging tax for the Horse Center. And although, of course, Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors has already approved their tax, we want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of any changes or any actions we take, how it would reflect on the board, of supervisors, the county, the Horse Center, and the city. So we're going to work together to see what can be done so we can best approach this issue and hopefully do something very positive for the community, for the city, for the county. And that's the extent of my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Members of council have any questions for the city manager? Very good. Hearing none, city attorney. Jeremy, anything for the good of the cause?
Just a few things. I think everyone received the edits to the ethics code that I made following the work session. If you have any questions about those, I tried to address the major points that we had talked about, the dissemination of information that a member may receive, making sure that the act applied to those members to whom it by its terms applied to and wasn't extended beyond that. Removing the word divisive, I think, was another edit. So those edits and some other cleanups, I fixed some typos that had made it through the first iteration. So if you have any questions, let me know. I was in the last couple of weeks contacted by Kaufman and Knowles. That's a firm in the eastern part of the state. It represents the city in the opioid litigation. There has been a settlement with regard to distributors such as Walmart and Walgreens and CVS. And you'll see coming up in a future, perhaps the first or the second meeting in March, a resolution concerning accepting and entering into that settlement. We don't know the specific numbers for Lexington yet. That'll depend in part on the number of localities who participate in the settlement. But I did want to let you know that that would be coming down the pike. And I have mentioned to Mr. Mayor and Mr. Hallis, I have a trial around the next meeting, March 2nd, March 3rd. Just wanted everybody to be aware that I may not be at the next meeting. If I'm not, my partner, Mike Lockaby, will be here. He will, I will brief him fully on anything that will be coming up, and he'll be fully prepared to handle anything. Other than that, if you have any questions, always happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jeremy. Members of council have any questions? And just to echo, Jeremy will not likely be with us virtually or in person on the March 2nd. And encourage him to settle the case, and he could be with us, but certainly understand if the judge feels differently on that circumstance.
Unfortunately, it's a function of the two parties coming to an agreement, and that seems like it's an uphill battle at this point.
Okay. The judge wouldn't mind either, I guess.
He would not mind either. That is correct.
Terrific. And relatively speaking, on the opioid circumstance, of course, we've been allocated some funds. And again, at the mayors and chairs breakfast, we talked about embracing a regional approach to get the, if you will, the greatest bang for our buck and the greatest consistency in our community, because those proceeds we don't get to use for anything we don't get to choose how to use it per se. It has to be used for prevention and a benefit of folks that have been negatively impacted by the opioid crisis. So the three jurisdictions are planning to work together and pool our assets together to have a more meaningful response to that. So wanted to share that with you. Not aware of any new business. And we have no closed session. So unless there's anything else council's mind, we will stand adjourned. And at 7:47 rather. And thank you all for your time and talents and for being here.